Illuminate teens. Here we go. We're going to be talking again about David, King David. And here he gets to show kindness. A king shows kindness in this. And we're going to be talking about the doctrine of adoption and how when we are saved, we are adopted into the family of God. And because we are adopted into the family of God, we get to have access to all that God is. All of who he is, we get to act like him. We get to be like him in the sense of all of his character and reflecting that. We get to take up his resources. God gives so many blessings, and that's because we are part of the family of God when we get saved. Are you saved? Are you adopted into his family? So that's the doctrine, and you'll see that play out throughout this lesson in the example that's shown through David's kindness. Now, God's grace through Christ invites us to come sit at his table as his children. And that's exactly what that doctrine is portraying in this lesson. So, what if someone just came up to you and we just saw a group of graduates do their graduation parade through Taylorville High School, and what if somebody came up to one of those graduates, and maybe you were one of those graduates, and they said, listen, I am going to pay for a full year of college for you. Now, you can't go and buy a yacht and say that that's somehow helpful for your schooling. But what if they were just to open it up to where you could study abroad, and you couldn't just have access to millions of dollars in that sense, but whatever you did was taken care of. Your meals, your housing, and at a sane level, okay? It's not like you could go buy a mansion because you're in school. No, I'm just talking about all of your housing, your room and board for school, your books are taken care of. You know, how would you, they didn't say which school you could go to. It doesn't matter. How would you treat that? Would you be thankful? How would you treat them afterwards? How would you act around them? Would you just give them a big old hug? Where would you go? What's your answers to all these questions? See, all of a sudden in this story, we find someone who probably felt like they had nothing, all of a sudden had access to just about everything. And we see here that David has been given victory after victory from God. He's just been doing great. And all of a sudden he comes to a point where he just knew he needed to make good on a promise that he had made. And we come to 2 Samuel chapter 9, verse 1 through 5, and it says, And David said, Is there yet any that is left of the house of Saul, that I may show him kindness for Jonathan's sake? And there was one of the house of Saul, a servant, whose name was Ziba. And when they had called him unto David, and the king said unto him, Art thou Ziba? And he said, Thy servant is he. And the king said, Is there not yet any of the house of Saul, that I may show the kindness of God unto him? And Ziba said unto the king, Jonathan hath yet a son, which is lame on his feet. And the king said unto him, Where is he? And Ziba said unto the king, Behold, he is in the house of Machir, the son of Ammiel, in Lodabar. There you go. My pronunciations again. I apologize, but you get the point. Then King David sent and fetched him out of the house of Machir, the son of Ammiel, from Lodabar. And so we come here to a point where David is looking for a way to extend kindness to his best friend, who is the son of Saul, who has now passed away. His best friend Jonathan has passed away, and yet he's asking, is there anyone in his line that I can show kindness towards? That I can fulfill this promise, that I can make good on the promise, my word. And really, when you open this up, you think, at any point, he could just wipe them out. The family, the rival family who was in kingship, who had probably tried to assassinate David, he's giving them opportunities, and yet he says, I don't care about that. I'm trusting in God that he's going to take care of me, and I want to make good on this promise. So whoever's there, I want to be good to them. What are some ways that we can intentionally seek out how to do good to others? How can you be intentionally showing kindness towards someone today. But as he gets into this, he finds out through a servant, Ziba, that there is someone. His name is Mephibosheth, and it sounds like he's handicapped. He's lame. He can't really do anything for himself. He can't do anything for David. This is a one-way street, no conditions. It's out of a pure heart. He can do nothing for David, and yet David wants to do so much for Mephibosheth. And when we come into this, we see that David's really not searching for applause from man. He's just searching how to do right because of God. And how does that affect our motives? Like, what are some of your motives that could be wrong that you use in order to do good things? Maybe you're just seeking man's applause. Man's attaboy, a pat on the back. Attagirl, great job. Maybe that's what our motives are. How do you use this wrong motive for the sake of good things? Is it wrong when we're using wrong motives for the sake of good things? The answer is yes. When we don't have a pure heart in trying to do good for others, then we mess up even though we're doing good things. We do mess up. We miss out on so much. But as we go through this, in verses 6 through 10, it says, Now when Mephibosheth, the son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, was coming to David, he fell on his face and did reverence. And David said, Mephibosheth. And he answered, Behold thy servant. So Mephibosheth comes up, and we're just going to label him M, okay? We're going to label him M for this story. So M is for Mephibosheth, just so I don't have to pronunciate that 17 times. So M comes before David, and he bows down, and he says, I am your servant. So he's totally respectful. He knows that he's got nothing against David, and he could be wiped out at any moment. Yet David doesn't do that. David said unto him, Fear not, for I will surely show thee kindness for Jonathan thy father's sake, and will restore thee all the land of Saul thy father, and thou shalt eat bread at my table continually. And he bowed himself and said, What is thy servant, that thou shouldest look upon such a dead dog as I am? Then the king called to Ziba, Saul's servant, and said unto him, I have given unto thy master's son all that pertained to Saul and to all his house. Thou therefore and thy sons and thy servants shalt till the land for him, and thou shalt bring in the fruits, that thy master's son may have food to eat. But Mephibosheth, thy master's son, shall eat bread always at my table. Now Ziba had 15 sons and 20 servants. And so David received him into his household and said, You're going to eat at my table. All the land that your father had, it's in yours. And he even goes a step further and says all of Saul's past servants are now going to be M's servants and till the land, farm the land, because M can't do it for himself. He's lame. He's got a handicap. And so David totally takes care of him in this sense. David makes himself a reflection of God in this sense, because he could have sent servants just to go to M and tell him all these things, and yet he wanted to personally talk with M himself and hand this over, just like God does. He likes to be personally involved in our lives, talk with us through his word, be prayed to. We don't have to go through anybody else in order to get to God, except for Jesus, obviously, to become a Christian. But you don't have to come and talk to me so that I can mediate on your behalf. You can go straight to God because of Jesus. Because Jesus adopted you. We have that access if you're a Christian. And so as we come into this point and we start asking, he's personally being involved with M here. And M viewed himself as a dead dog, which is very humiliating. Dogs were not looked upon in a positive way. They were not necessarily pets, and they were annoying, okay? They were annoying. And they'd scrounge for food on the streets, whatever. And he classified himself as a dead dog, a scrounger that's dead. It's just useless. he didn't even have a good view of himself. And he's saying, why are you doing this for me? And David just went a step further, said, all of your old servants are going to be serving you and helping you through this. So his table, constant access. You say in verse 11 through 13, then said Ziba unto the king, according to all my lord the king hath commanded his servant, so shall thy servant do. As for Mephibosheth, said the king, he shall eat at my table as one of the king's sons. So it's almost like he's adopted him into his home. He's acting just as his son. And Mephibosheth had a young son whose name was Micah, and all that dwelt in the house of Ziba were servants unto Mephibosheth. So Mephibosheth dwelt in Jerusalem, for he did eat continually at the king's table, and was lame on both of his feet. Again, we see that Mephibosheth could not do anything for himself. He couldn't do anything in response to David, and yet this is total grace given by David for him here in this instance. Okay, how would you have reacted if you were him in this circumstance? Would you give him a big old hug? I mean, would you bow even lower? How would you respond? Would you cry a little bit? I mean, knowing where M is and how desperate he is, and how he's got nothing because Saul died, Jonathan died. He's got nothing. And here he is. Now he gets servants. He gets land. He gets so much access and grace because David showed kindness. Now, how does this work out with Christ? Christ, we can be adopted. We get the resources. We can reflect God as his children. There's so much awesomeness packed into this for us to be able to experience. We get to sit at his table because of Jesus Christ. And that's total grace. Nothing that we deserve. We can't give anything for it. It's just all of Christ. In Christ alone. I've said it so many times. Those words, in Christ alone, my hope is found. So how does this help you to respond in obedience to God after all that he's done for you? I trust that you'll be able to grasp this notion here today, this challenge, and be able to use it in a positive way to be intentionally gracious towards others this week, hopefully even today, and to love God's grace even more as we've seen it enacted out by a person here and by Christ through all that he's done. I hope you enjoyed that. We will talk to you soon, teens.